Hello, crafty friends. Adrienne Bosey of Alice Scraps Wonderland here. And today on my channel, we're going to be doing what I think is probably a long-awaited video series, and that is how I do my photography and videography. I wanted to film this in December of 2024 when I had some time. Unfortunately, when I did have time, I got really sick with pneumonia for 6 weeks. So I'm finally filming this, and we're going to get into all of the great details of how I set up for photography, how I do my videography, editing, all of that good stuff. I'm going to be breaking this down into a series of videos, otherwise it would be one really long video. And today we're going to focus on how to set up for Flatlay photography. I'm going to talk about the equipment that I use, the things that I think are really handy for you to have on hand, and elements that you definitely need in your photo that are going to make people stop in their tracks and say, wow, I really want to make this, and interact with your photo on socials. Hey, editor Adrienne here. So I actually decided to break this video up into even more parts than originally planned, just because I go into so much detail on setting up different composition styles for your flat lays, and I didn't want this video to be an hour and a half long. So I'm actually breaking this first portion down into 3 different videos. So enjoy all the copious amounts of information I give you. So let's get right into it. So first, let's go over some of the main things that you will need in order to take photos. First up is a light source. I definitely recommend natural lighting, which is why I'm being backlit here by my window, because that is the window that I use. It's right here in my craft room, and natural lighting I definitely think provides the best look for your photos. It gives a nice warm glow. You can definitely use artificial lighting, but why buy an artificial light when you have free natural light right through your window? The other thing that you'll need is something to set your flat lay up on. And if you have a window that comes up to your waist, you want to have something to raise your project up on, like a table, to get your project right next to that light. And what I use is the Replica Surfaces Studio. They won't be making this anymore after a while. They still have some that you can order. So if you want it, I would definitely get it. But otherwise, a table is totally fine. And I'll show you how to set up surfaces that are placed on this without this fancy little studio table, so that you can use those flat lay backdrops just like I do, just without the fancy table. The other thing that you'll need to have is a bounce screen. And this is basically just a big white surface that is going to take the light from your window, and it'll hit that surface and bounce back down onto your project. So you're getting a light source from 2 sides on your project to get rid of shadows. And we'll go over how to set that up in just a minute. The other thing that you'll want to have is a diffuser. On really sunny days, the shadows can be really harsh on your projects, and you want to soften those shadows, and a diffuser will do that for you. And we'll talk about the diffuser that I have in a moment. Finally, the other thing, of course, that you need is a camera, and I don't use anything fancy. I do own a DSLR, but I actually prefer just using my camera phone. And I have an iPhone, and I think it's an iPhone 12. So even the older models still take really good photos. And then finally, if you want to do any kind of hands-free filming where you're picking something up, you'll definitely want a camera mount. And I'll show you that as well. And of course, as always, I'll have all my product recommendations listed in the description box below for you. All right, so this is the Replica Studio. And you could definitely, of course, use something like this TV tray to set your projects up on. But what I find really handy about this is that it perfectly is sized to fit the flat lay backdrops that I use, and it's got these nice little corners so that it doesn't move around and it swivels around. So let's get into some of the other elements here that I wanted to show you. The camera mount that I use is this right here, and this is the Archon mount, and this will fit your phone, and it stretches to fit. And you can move it all around. All of these are adjustable. The height is adjustable, and the base is nice and heavy and sturdy. And you can get different styles of mounts. You can get ones for cameras, one for your phone. You can get an extra mount for your iPad. It can get pretty fancy. And I definitely like it. And I will set this up on my photography cart when I want to do hands-free photography. And I actually sometimes will stick these on here just to make it more sturdy. And we'll go over this in just a minute. But first, what I wanted to show you in this cart, this is what I use for my diffuser, and I will open this up and show it to you. All right, so this is basically a reflector kit, and it comes in this nice little pouch, and inside you'll get this screen. And this is what I use as a diffuser. It's got this really not translucent, but opaque fabric. And this will help you soften your shadows. And I'll show you how this all gets set up. But some of the other things in here that are included is the actual reflector screen, which that piece goes inside of this. And it comes with like this silver reflector. And I think, does it switch out to gold on the other side? Yeah, there is. And if you want a warm bounce, there's gold on the inside on the other side. So it switches around. But I never use this part. I literally just use the other piece as a diffuser. So let me show you how I get my photography table all set up. But first, let's maybe dive right into the photography cart and some of the things that I have on it that I think you will find helpful. So let's start at the top of the photography cart. I have a little basket here that I place the project that I want to photograph along with some of the supplies that I use to make the project in this basket so that it's all ready to go. Other things that you'll find helpful are like coasters and trays and slices of wood or frames. On the second shelf, that's where I keep my diffuser. There are items in here like pearls and lace. This has some doilies and spoons, like little mini teaspoons. There's some faux greenery in here, and we'll go through more of this too, but it's kind of hard to see it on the cart. I have some clamps. Sometimes that's helpful for holding things in place. And then down here are some clear acrylic stamping blocks. I use those a lot, and we'll talk about why, along with a book. And then some of these are actually craft supplies that I use in projects like seashells and stuff that I have under there. Now, the photography cart is really helpful because it's all right there next to where I photograph. And it keeps a lot of things that I don't use for project making, but only for photography, tucked away really nicely. So let's talk about some of these things that are on my cart that I think are really helpful in project photography. Now, a lot of the things that I use are things like frames, which are really nice to actually like frame your project or just use as kind of like a background element type thing. And I'll show you how I use some of these things. Coasters can be really helpful to use as a riser or just as like, you know, a little element to put like an embellishment that you've used on to showcase that embellishment. My friend made this little piece of pottery for me, and I use it to mix watercolors in, but I've also used it to hold glitter glass and embellishments and other things that I've set off to the side, kind of similar to these little trays that I use. I have this in both gold and silver. And I also find like little wood slice is also really helpful, especially if you have something that's kind of rustic styled. And then I also have this tray that I think is really cool. And that these just basically kind of serve as a nice little base to start building up your project, especially these bigger items like the frames, the trays, and this wood slice. The other things that I think are really helpful that are bigger like this for building up your scene are things like your stamping platform and other larger tools like die cut machines that you've used in your project that you want to showcase. The things that you probably don't see in my photo, let's go over those next. And these are oftentimes in my photos, you just never see them. These are clear acrylic stamp blocks. I've got a variety of sizes. I even use these really thin ones from Tim Holtz. Sometimes I use like half of a clothespin. Just anything that kind of helps lift your project up toward the camera. And that can give you a really good depth of field. And I just store the little ones that I never use for making projects in this little lid from a scrapbook.com storage thing in my cart. And then, of course, these ones I actually do use in making, so I just grab them from my stash when I need them. And the other thing besides that is poster putty. And this is this tacky stuff that's really good for holding things like bottles in place when you lay them flat. And I'll show you that right now. So let's say I wanted to include my Sizzix Express glue in there. And so I just stick a little bit of that on there and then stick it on, and then it keeps it from rolling around. Sometimes it's gotta make sure I've got it on there right on the back. And it should keep it from rolling around. So you can see that the camera is moving because I'm bouncing on here, but this isn't going anywhere. So that's what that's for. So I use that on the back of bottles, on the back of paintbrushes, and oftentimes these are things you don't really see unless maybe you catch a tiny little glimpse of it depending on the camera angle, or sometimes in reels when I pick a project up, kind of show it and set it back down, and you get just a tiny little glimpse of these in that video. So these are definitely used and definitely handy to have. Next up, for things that are great for your project photos are your making tools. So if you use your scoring board and trimmer tool to make some kind of like folded, multi-fold card type thing, you definitely want to showcase that in your photos, and it makes a great starting base for building up your Flatlay on. And of course, all of your smaller tools, your scissors, any size, brushes. I use a lot of brushes, your blending brushes. I just took out one of my little mini ones, but any size, tapes. Those are also good. And sometimes I actually use these as risers as well underneath photos. Your adhesives, little tools like your pickers and things like that, distressing tools. And if you use gems and you got a nice little tray that you put your gems in when you're working on your projects, putting your gems into this little tray can make it look really pretty and shows off the tools that you used while making your project. And finally, of course, are all the really pretty embellishments and things that you'll often see in my photos. You'll see me use molds, even mold casts that have been unpainted, inks, stamps, like if you have a decorative stamp like this, sometimes even if you didn't use it in your project, it just looks really nice off to the side. I often use ribbon in my projects, and I'll put them on these extra little spools, glitter glass, lace is a great textural element. Of course, I'm on Prima's design team, so I always have lots of flowers, and I love the Renee Bouquet butterflies. Sometimes I use them just when I need to match a color and I didn't use it. And obviously, if I've done a Renee Bouquet project, I definitely show those off. And other things like wax beads, wax seals, and of course, your metal dies. Those can definitely all be used to showcase along with inks and other things. So anything that you've used or anything that just looks pretty and adds some kind of little element to your Flatlay to add texture, dimension, and all of those beautiful things. And finally, because you've been hearing me talk about texture and of course depth and dimension in your photography, the other thing that I want to talk about is adding some kind of textural element besides, like ribbon on a spool. And that's often the things that you see right in the background over the Flatlay background that I use. And that's things like lace or even tea towels. All right, so now let's get into what you've probably been waiting for, and that's setting up. Okay, so let's talk about a few important things for when you're setting up. And of course, you've already been hearing me talk about this, some of the things that are great to have in your photos, and that is texture and dimension. And I'll show you how to achieve those with the products and elements that we've talked about already. The other thing to keep in mind is that your camera lens is going to see things very differently than how your own eye sees things. When you look at things through your camera, you may find, if you've set it up just looking at it with your own eye, that you're going to have to squish elements in to really get them into view on your camera lens. And that's because your lens is often a much wider angle. And so you're going to have to shove all of those things in your photo around your project a lot closer together than you actually think they should be. So it's really helpful to, if you're just starting out, to set up your Flatlay with your camera overhead and actually look at it through your lens as you're setting up. Now let's talk about how to set up for lighting in your window. So this is the photography table that I use. And I'm going to stick this bar towards my light source because that is where I'm going to stick my diffuser. Now, if you don't have this kind of table, let me show you how to set this up. All of these over here are all of my backgrounds, and they're meant to fit right into these. These are all from Replica surfaces. And generally what I love to use most often, and probably just because it's sitting on my craft table and it's easy and I don't have to think about it, is my shiplap. And these little corner pieces will go in here. And then for your bounce screen, you want to have something that's white. And I generally use a really big plain white surface, but it doesn't quite fit in there. And so what you're going to do is you're going to push. Sometimes I think it's easier to get one side in and then do the other. I haven't used these in a while. Not for this anyway. All right, there we go. So it goes into this little L shape, and then you'd put the other bracket over here, and that will hold it up. My table is very slippery. All right, I won't make it perfect, but you kind of get the idea. So your light source is over here. The light's going to come in, hit your project. It's also going to hit this screen, this bounce screen, and it's going to come back and hit your project from the other side. And that will help cancel shadows out by having light sources basically directly across from each other. So that's how that works. But let's set it up on how I normally do it with my studio. So I'm going to stick this in here, and there's these little like notches here that kind of help keep this from sliding around. And then the bounce screen that I typically use is this big white glossy surface. And then the other thing that I also do for photography, and this isn't, I'm filming this in the afternoon, and normally I do my photography in the morning. That's when the sun is usually in this window. So it's not going to look quite as bright, but so anyway, I just open up my shutters. Stay. The shutter likes to, there we go. So you can see already that makes a big difference just by opening that up. And then I stick the diffuser in right here, and I generally kind of let it come like this. It usually ends up brightening down here just a little bit, and we'll kind of show that in an overhead. But I usually just kind of sneak in here and take my photos. And I'm filming on my camera, so I can't show you how it looks when I'm actually holding my phone to take photos. But sometimes I stick my bounce screen up here in my window if I really need to, like have a bigger angle, or if I'm filming something or photographing something that is not a flat lay, that's, you know, has a background for like a wall basically. So let me get this camera set up so that you can see what the flat lay looks like as I'm creating it. Just another note, I often use my white shutters as another bounce screen. So you can totally set up another one of these across here and have that. But I'm going to be sticking my camera in here and filming down for you so you can see how things are coming together. Okay, so we've got our bounce screen set up, we've got our flat lay down, and let me see if I can kind of show you this. It might be easier to see once we have things on. This is with the diffuser, and you can kind of see the things will get brighter as I angle that. Yeah, I think you can see that on camera. And I've got this as wide as I possibly can. And honestly, I don't set up with the diffuser on. I put that on right before I take photos. So we'll set that off to the side. Hey, video editor Adrian here, doing the sign off. I hope that you really enjoyed this first part of part one in this multi-part video, and that you enjoyed seeing what I have in my photography prop arsenal and the other tools that I use to help me take my Flatlay photography. And that you also enjoyed seeing the general basic setup for natural lighting in this very first part. So in the next two videos, I'll be going over 4 different styles of composition flat lays for you. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so that you get notified as soon as those are released. I'm going to kind of space them out just a little bit so that that I don't overwhelm the YouTube algorithm. So until next time, happy crafting.